we don't have favourite museums in AMOT. The concept is ridiculous. But we do have museums where we have more engagement over certain periods of time than others, and there has been a lot of good engagement with the Suffolks during the closure and refurbishment, and we're really looking forward to hearing about it. I mean, every regiment has its greatness to tell the story, but I was just thinking at lunchtime, the Suffolk Regiment was in the forefront of D-Day on Sword Beach, quite apart from all that magnificent stuff at Minden in the 18th century and the First World War, the Far East, fall to Singapore, and then becomes generally regarded as the finest regiment in the Malayan emergency. I suppose we exclude Gurkhas there, but the finest regiment in the Malayan emergency on head count, certainly, and you've got a lot to play with, but people can make a mess even of a strong hand. It's a fantastic museum, it really is. Many congratulations. Tell us how you did it.
Right, so hello everyone, and thank you to AMOT for inviting me to speak today. A little bit about me. Everyone asks when they come to the museum, did you serve? The answer's no. However, I've spent quite a long time in heritage now. Started out as an archaeologist, and then I spent 10 years as collections manager at the Whipple Museum of the History of Science, which is a designated collection in the University of Cambridge, before about 5 years ago starting a new challenge with the Suffolk Regiment. However, I have been around the military for basically my entire life. I grew up in a naval town. Bizarrely, the 12th of Foot, the predecessors of the Suffolk Regiment, were actually stationed there, which I didn't realise until I started this job. I had 3 grandparents in the army during the Second World War. My dad was in the Navy for 22 years, and I spent time in university holidays and straight from university working in Portsmouth Naval Base, and kind of got the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Troops ready for Optelic several years ago now. So that's kind of my background. So it wasn't such a big leap for me to come into a military museum. So this is where we are. It's the Keep, which is the former armoury of the Suffolk Regiment Depot. It's been around since the late 1800s, and it's blooming cold in the winter when the heating doesn't work. We actually share the building. It's still owned by the MOD, but we share it with the Royal Anglian Regiment headquarters. So we've got a corridor and some office space on the ground floor. The museum gallery is on the middle floor, and the regimental headquarters is on the top floor. But we've got a really good relationship with regimental headquarters. This is what I inherited. As you can see, half the lighting doesn't work. It was really cluttered. There was literally no space on the walls whatsoever. So again, not very nice environment. When it was set up 20 years ago like this, it was designed by well-meaning volunteers for veterans with an assumed knowledge of the history of the regiment. The audience has changed. So our youngest veterans are now in their mid-80s. One of them used to be one of my volunteers, and he was in Cyprus during his national service, and he was coming to me and saying, but I want to read that, I can't see it because there's other things on top of it. So if one of my veterans was saying that, we had a bit of a problem. As I say, I know of at least one D-Day veteran that we still have left, but everyone else is national service, and as I say, in their mid-80s. the audience has changed. It's now the children of, the grandchildren of, even the great-grandchildren of. And a lot of them have no knowledge of the service of their forebears. So we felt it was our job to put more interpretation into the galleries and make it kind of more obvious for people who had no knowledge of the regiment. When we announced that we were going to overhaul the Regiment Museum, we got a bit of unfair commenting on social media, and I was described as the woman who parachuted in from Cambridge. Prior to closing, we'd already produced new panels to introduce the regiments and displays in the corridor downstairs. So it was a more welcoming space for the visitors. And one person who visited us just before they changed jobs said it smelt nicer. So things you don't think about when you're doing a refurb. Right at the start of the project, obviously we had to look at deadlines for deinstallation, new lighting and decorating before we started the new displays. And I haven't actually taken the Gantt chart down yet. I can't bear to. Funding for the project, mostly funded by us. We did get a town council grant from Bury St Edmunds Town Council, which was for £4,200, which covered the decorating costs. The project fund that we had to spend was £36,000, and we came in at £30,000. There's still some work to do. We kind of did more interpretation panels than we were planning to originally. So I kind of held off buying display mounts, but I've been given the go-ahead by our treasurer to actually spend some money again now. So you can see the displays are quite cluttered, but everyone loves a good drum, you know. And the uniforms, you know, we had uniforms on top of cabinets. It's a risk to the uniforms, you know. If moths get into the collection, we've got a real problem. So we started off by deinstalling everything. We gave ourselves 4 weeks to do that, and we did it. So we closed in the end of October last year. That gave us the entirety of November to deinstall everything. I got my trustees involved, which was fantastic because, you know, they had family connections to both the Suffolk Regiment and the Royal Anglians, and they were loving getting hands-on with the collection, which is something that they wouldn't normally do. Mannequins. These were the first things we took apart. It was fairly obvious that there were some issues with them. You can see Mr. Bendy Legs in the centre there. And yeah, we had some real issues. They were stuffed with horsehair. And the Malayan Chinese terrorist uniform on the left-hand side actually had the boots nailed to the wooden struts that were supporting it, which we only realised when we tried to take them off. So this is what it looked like when it was deconstructed. I ended up completely covered in horsehair. When I first started, we got some funding from the Association for Suffolk Museums to buy a museum vac. We hadn't had one before. It came in really handy to do this. So this is what it looked like when it was deconstructed. And we found the Sunday Times from 2nd of July 1978, stuffing the shoes. There's no way I can take the blame for that because that was 2 years before I was born. So again, this is what they looked like when they were deconstructed. The horsehair was recycled. We gave it to some SEND students at the local college to make scarecrows. So it didn't go to waste. And Luke and Kim's head fell off when we were moving him. And I often came into the gallery to find my volunteers had left some of the mannequins in slightly compromising situations. So this is more mannequins in slightly states of disarray. The deinstallation, as I say, took 4 weeks. There were lots of panic dreams and lying awake at night, trying to decide what to do the next day. You know, what was a quick win? What case would be really quick and easy to empty? Then we had to pack a bear cub. So again, you can see me on my hands and knees in the gallery, trying to figure out what to do with him. So yeah, acid-free tissue, rolled very carefully, and then put in a suit bag because that was all we had available. I couldn't have done any of this work without my volunteers. So the first things we did was empty everything out, obviously, move all the cabinets away from the walls, and we had new lighting installed. So we moved away from halogen bulbs that basically didn't work to LED strips, and it's a lot lighter and brighter in there now. As part of this process, I stupidly decided over the month of December to do an advent calendar. And the most popular post that I made on Facebook was the cutting in of the window. Not any of the discoveries that we made, it was the decoration. The lighting, I should say, was funded by DIO because it is an MAD building still, so we got that done as building works. So this is what we looked like in the midst of everything. Looks chaotic, but we knew where everything was. And where do you store an entire museum collection? The answer is in the corridor outside my office. Boxes were everywhere, and it was made far more complicated when DIO turned up with no warning to paint the corridor. And I had no help in that day, so I had to move all of that on my own in a slightly quick and panicked situation, but RHQ gave me a little bit of space in their storeroom to do that. So yeah, building boxes was a large part of my life for a while, and we weren't ashamed to put the granddaughter of one of our volunteers to work either. She was an absolute powerhouse when it came to trying to find objects again. And that is what my office looked like for a good while. So another thing we did in-house was refurbishing the cabinets. So we stripped a lot of them back, coming up with solutions to make them a bit stronger. My assistant and our volunteers did all the painting themselves. We spent a lot of money on paint. And I couldn't have done it without these guys. So we've got 3 of my volunteers and my assistant there trying to put together a massive cabinet. It was not easy. And one volunteer, Steve, who's got the pink sleeves there, was amazing at problem solving for us. He used to be in REME, and if I said to him, I want to put this here, how am I going to do it? He would actually engineer solutions for me. So we've got a de Laszlo portrait of Lieutenant Colonel Barnardiston, and he actually fabricated a steel mount to go in the window recess so we could actually hang this safely. And that portrait did actually prompt me and 2 of the volunteers to go on a away day to Gainsborough's house in Sudbury to see a special exhibition about the de Laszlo paintings, so we could see other examples. So, new discoveries in the collection. We found that some of the cabinets had actually been made out of depot storage boxes. We had boots stuffed with laundry bags and more newspapers. And when we took this cap off a polystyrene head, we found the owner had written, "Not yours." So how did we reinterpret? We decided for a mix of chronological and thematic displays. Previously, if you said to somebody, "What are you interested in?" and they said the First World War, you'd say, "Okay, there's some there, some over there, oh, and a couple of bits over there as well." So it wasn't a logical layout. So we've gone chronological around the room. So we've outlined the early years, Boer War, First World War, interwar period, Second World War, Far East prisoners of war, and national service. And we've taken it right up to date with panels about the Royal Anglian Regiment. So, we are working with colleagues in the successor regiment as well. I shamelessly stole the photo on the right from Andrew Bamford when he came to visit us mid-reinstall. And one thing when we were closed, it was really important to keep doing was outreach. We were fairly concerned that if we shut, people would forget about us. And so we held some stalls in the Guildhall when they did a One Town, Many Stories exhibition. I did talks at the local college and in the local library. So it was trying to keep the museum alive through outreach. One thing that was really important to us was telling the personal stories. So we have one cabinet in the centre of the room, which is dedicated to personal stories from each of the eras. And I was really proud to be able to tell the story of Keith Flood, who was a volunteer at the museum for 17 years. And I didn't tell him until he actually visited. So I snuck that up on him. But ultimately, telling the story of the regiment is telling the story of the people. And people like learning about people. So these are examples of our new interpretation panels. I wrote all the words, chose all the photos, sent them off to a designer that we'd use for the panels downstairs. So he knew our house style as it is now. And we kept to a very tight word count because our remit wasn't to tell the history of each of those periods and each of those wars. It was to tell the story of what the Suffolks and the Cambridgeshires were doing. Yeah, sometimes things don't quite work. We were really pleased with the first photo here, or the first display here, until we closed the door of the cabinet and found you couldn't actually see all of the drum. So you learn to sort of change things around. There's a Maori weapon there, so we've actually put that on a mount so that people can actually see the shape rather than it being flat. And I actually snuck some personal things in that nobody else will know, but I'm originally from the Portsmouth area, and one of our VC winners, after First World War, moved to Portsmouth to set up tea rooms. So I managed to get that into the panel. And there's another personal story where there's a rangefinder, which is centred on where I currently live. So you get to sneak those little personal touches in, but nobody else realises. So these are some of the new displays. We took on the Cambridgeshire Regiment collection just before I started, and it was really important to us to represent them as well as the Suffolks. So a lot of the Far East prisoner of war material is Cambridgeshire, and previously the FIPO material was like 2 shelves in a case that was really low down. You couldn't see it. But in total, we had 4 battalions over the 2 regiments that were FIPOs. So it was a big part of their story. The Harvey Frost collection, apologies for the bad photo on the left, but that's what it looked like before we took it all apart. It was all stuck to a Hessian backing. I don't even remember how the gas mask was held up. But we've sort of stripped the case back, As you can see, we've painted it, added shelves, added interpretation, and here's a really nice local story for us in Bury St Edmunds. He was in the Suffolk Regiment, went into the Royal Flying Corps, was prisoner of war, was repatriated. When he came back, he set up building contractors, and you still see H.G. Frost building contractors rolling around town. He was instrumental in the building of the sugar beet factory, which is on the skyline of Bury. And he was also governor at the local technical college, which now sits on the remains of the barracks site. So the guns we kind of kept as they were. We worked on the assumption of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you can see that we're pretty much there with the photo on the right-hand side. Some displays remained similar, but were updated. Old favourites remained on display. So you can see we've compacted the drum display a little bit. We've got Sir Edward, who is a favourite with everybody, still on display. And on the right-hand side there, you can see we've got a 21st century soldier, so bringing it right up to date with the Royal Anglians. We also have a map, which I didn't include a photograph of, unfortunately, that was used by the adjutant of the 1st Battalion on the retreat to Dunkirk. It's covered with his notes, and we had it conserved, paid for by the family, and moved from the very top of the room to eye level, so people can actually see it now. So what did we do with all the boxes? We don't have any storage, so we basically got a friend of mine to make curtains to go under the cabinets. We kind of had to make that decision because we had nowhere else for it to go. You do have to watch your volunteers, though. They can be pesky, and one of them hid Toto twice, and I didn't find him until after the reopening, which was kind of embarrassing. So this is us with everything done. There's always tweaks. And the displays will change as we get more things into the collection. We've also got a gallery down at Moyses Hall, which is the main museum in town, and the collections will be changing there, so we'll be integrating those objects into the displays at the Keep. The end result is that we opened on time and under budget. The whole project, we closed at the end of October, and we had a soft opening on the 3rd of July with the official reopening on Minden Day on the 4th of August. There were challenges along the way. One of my volunteers broke her wrist. She's no longer allowed to go on holiday. My friend that made the curtains for under the cabinets, she had a stroke. I managed to damage my sciatic nerve and was struggling up the stairs with a walking stick at times. And I also lost my dad partway through the project. We have further challenges ahead. Our local authority has basically cut the funding for the archive service in Bury St Edmunds. So we're going to have to take all of this on with nowhere for it to go. We are working on a solution at the moment, and ironically, we're working with the local authority to fix it. We're also working on new displays with colleagues from Norfolk and the Royal Anglian Regiment for the gallery at Moyses Hall. Recruiting and retaining volunteers. I'm sure a lot of you have the same issues. It's hard. And I did a big recruitment drive before we reopened. Some of them decided that it wasn't for them. So I'm now doing it all again. We are taking all of the Cambridgeshire Regiment bits and pieces that are currently in the Land Warfare Hall at Duxford back, because they're tearing the Land Warfare Hall down. So I need to find ways of integrating those into the collection at the Keep, and potentially finding another museum in Cambridgeshire for them to be displayed. Location updates after such a massive move is ongoing. And we're trying to get more group visits into the museum. Since we've reopened, we've had a group from Watersham Airfield, Fornham Saints WI, we've got a group from the Beaver Scouts lined up, we've got a visit from the 3rd Battalion Royal Anglians lined up, and I've also got more visits booked into November next year. So, yeah, we're doing all right. So, yeah.
Thank you, Claire. I'm humbled. A small budget, trustees, self-help, realistic aim of, well, tidying it up and making it not look tired any longer, and coming up with something that clearly is going to, well, as you said in your last piece, visited by serving soldiers. What more can you ask for? Congratulations, bravo.